Welcome to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And I'm Chatawanse. Good evening, good morning, good nights, wherever you are. Good afternoon.
Right. Good afternoon. Yeah. So Cheta, it's that time of the year again, isn't it?
What
It's
time of the year?
it's September, and that means millions of children across the UK are going back to school.
Is
Now,
it just
while
the
some of
UK?
us, yeah, and well, this is a UK-based podcast talking about issues here in the UK. So there's that. But apart from many parents, yours truly included, who will be happy to get some respite for just a few hours in the day when the children are out of the door. Uh, what we also see is people who um, will be coming under some financial burden because back to school isn't just kids out of the house. It means dipping your hands into your pockets to fork out hundreds of pounds to get school supplies. Now, on average, parents spend about £343 for primary school children and 442 if your kids are in secondary school. And this is on uniform and PE kits alone. Now, add shoes, stationery, technology, like your scientific calculators that like I've had to go and buy now.
We're in the same boat today.
Well, so that means for many households, and especially if your household is part of the 31% of those that have children living in relative low income, this is not just another seasonal spend; it's a real financial strain. Now, add even another layer to that being the focus of our podcast audience, African families who have migrated to the UK and who, for most parts, have no access or no recourse to public funds, then that means that people are saving up for school resumption as though they were saving up for holidays. So today we want to unpack the politics, the costs, and of course community responses, and what, if anything, needs to change. So Cheta, how are you feeling about this back to school season?
I mean, let's get back to a few episodes ago at the start of the holiday season, and I made my stand very clear. The Victorians had it right. Children should also work for their upkeep. It's this thing of just extorting money from, I saying you get all sorts of emails, all sorts of letters. Oh, you need to buy this, you need to buy this. You look at the children, they, especially if they're in the age range that mine are, where nothing fits them after 2 weeks. You bought something and then 2 days later, they're already outgrowing it. So it's kind of frustrating. And then they eat a lot. They eat a lot. Like, what's
I thought it
happening
was
here?
just me.
What's happening here? It's see, you with this your opening, you just you just basically hit on pain points for me right now. So
No, but it's quite interesting when I mean, and that's actually something that also needs to be talked about at some point, the cost of school holidays. Because
but we
if
talked about it. We talked
oh
about
no,
it
but
six
no,
weeks ago.
I'm just thinking about the food, man. I'm talking, or maybe it should just be the cost of food alone, of feeding
Man,
these
bro.
children with holes, it's like black holes in their bellies. But back to this back to school thing. One of the if your kids are in primary school, perhaps the biggest thing in terms of uniform you have to deal with is the school blazer. You can go to any high street shop as you wear, and you can get a white top, gray trouser, black trouser, whatever it is, relatively fine. However, the pain starts when they start getting into secondary school, and you see that suddenly you're buying a top with a badge on it. You're buying a
Yes.
blazer. You're not just buying um those. You have to buy from specific stores,
Specific
which
stores. The school actually sent us a list of specific stores that we could go to. This is where you can get it. And it, the whole thing was just branded. And there's an element of peer pressure in it. You don't want your child going to school looking like the lost, like the poor cousin, that kind of stuff, because kids are cruel. So if your child turns up in school looking very out of place, you are setting your child up to be bullied, to be bullied. So it's just it's some kind of pressure. Um, I mean, I read somewhere that the largest expense by far is school uniforms. Um, but beyond school uniforms, there are also shoes. You have all sorts of shoes. So me and the wife had a very healthy argument about the kind of shoes to buy. And we eventually reached a compromise. But even when I was forking out the money for the for the compromise, I was I was pained. I was like, you are, especially the young man. You are buying this shoe. You know that this guy is going to use this shoe for a year tops, and then next year we'll be back here again.
Oh my goodness, a year, man! You hit the lottery.
It's because of the. It's because of the. It's
Mine
because of the.
destroy their shoes in months.
No, it's because of the. As in, I can see that everybody in the house understands that daddy has been the Grinch this period, because I have been very, very badly behaved, quote and unquote, always following them to the shops, and I hate shopping. But this time around, I made sure I was there so that people will not go out of budget, because a friend of mine had a rather woeful experience. He let his wife go shopping for school stuff with the kids, and then he stayed at home and slept. By the time they got back home, the guy was holding his head. That's meh. He was really, because she had taken it as carte blanche. That's okay. And of course, the way uh, this is going to come off not too well in 2025.
So at this is the point at which I would caution you step back
And I'm stepping
and
back.
carefully think about what you want to say. But or maybe to save you, let me do a small, let me segue so that to save you from yourself, Tita. No, but seriously, I mean, we laugh about it, but however, the school uniforms, especially when you're getting from this branded shop or from these shops that the schools tell you absolutely have to get these uniforms from, they add on average £5 to £10 extra
item.
per item, as opposed to if you were getting just a regular white polo shirt from, say, Primark. Or no, Primark doesn't even.
No,
Yeah,
so let's
or
let
your
because
or,
I had the Primark quarrel.
mm.
And Madam made some very, very interesting points about durability. And this is, I don't want to knock on Primark, because I lived in the UK when Primark when people really used to turn their nose up at Primark. I remember when the Primark store at Oxford Street in London opened, and there was so much snobbery going on. So I think that Primark have done very well, but nevertheless, a brutal fact, I guess, is that their model of getting as many clues into the hands of the masses as possible has drawbacks in terms of quality. They have to make compromises. And Madame made an argument with respect to the uniforms, the shirts. There's some. So, for example, the school my son is going to, their shirts is white. They gave us, at least they were kind to us in that respect, and said you could buy any white shirts. So far, it was they were extremely detailed in the specification of the white shirts that they wanted. but you could buy it off the shelf anywhere, provided it fits the specification.
Mm.
So once the moment I saw that, see me on Pranac websites going to, but Madame shut it down so completely, and then brought out something I had bought for myself from Primark and showed me the neckline. I said, "You don't want this for," as in, I couldn't argue. Inside me, in my head, I was like, but he needs to learn how to manage, this. But the way she comprehensively shut it down. So we had to go to one other place, which I will not mention, where I was, as in, when it was time to swipe, my hand was physically shaking, that kind of like, no. But
But
be that as it may, I think the point is, when you have a situation where, for one child you're spending north of uh, north of £300 just for uniforms, you have to wonder about people who have 3, 4 kids.
mm,
How are they coping? I mean, it's pretty tough. And as the kids grow older, there are other expenses that come with secondary school as well. Um, so I have a couple of much older cousins who are done with the whole thing. That's saying, one of them, his last kids just finished university. I'm like, oh, I'm so jealous. Then there's a friend of mine, who is about our age, who is in our age range, but he started having kids early. He started having kids pretty much as soon as we finished university, which is, I mean, I finished from University of Benin, um, 22 years ago now. So his first child just finished his master's because his kids studied in the UK. His first child just finished his master's. The second one is about starting, and I'm like, oh, so lucky. And he. Oh well, yeah.
but so the for me it's quite interesting, this issue of uniforms. For instance, because and I just want to dwell on that because you've mentioned it. Because the argument from schools, from uh, again, the argument from the schools would be that these uniforms are a leveler. They bring everyone to almost down to some level, so that one, no one is looking down on the other. No, you don't have issues of snobbery. And also, I mean, they can talk about things like being able to identify schools when they're on school trips and all that. However, the biggest argument would be, you don't want people coming in, they're designers, and then you're looking at the others who can afford the designers. However, you have seen a rise of people going to clothes banks to get, some would like to call them pre-used, pre-loved secondhand clothing, because they just can't afford to buy the uniforms that are spanking new. So how is it then that something that was supposed to be a leveler has now turned into a creator of some disparity of sorts? Because as you said, if you have 2, 3 children, and if each child costs an upward of cost north of £300, so that's about £900 to £1,000 for about 3 kids if you have them in secondary school age. How many people can afford that? Because again, if you just look at the income disparity in the country right now, you look at the cost of living crisis, you look at, we're heading towards winter in a few months. People are going to start feeling the pinch again of high energy costs and all that. How are people supposed to balance all these costs and still think or go along with the argument that, what, these uniforms are creating a level playing field for our children and by effect our families?
Again, so that's a very interesting question that you've asked, and it comes down to something that I think is very, very human. We have, as a species, we have this thing of, ultimately, even in every system that may have been egalitarian at first, we have ways, as time goes on, of trying to make somebody or some set of people, preferably us as opposed to others, to be at the top of the pile. So human beings naturally tend to some sort of hierarchy, and this is being displayed. I mean, think back to Nigeria, for example, when we were there, and bear in mind our kids were in the same school. I don't know if you remember an incident where someone bought I mean, the kids were having used to have uniforms and all of that, and they were pretty small, and they were pretty. I mean, at that point, the kids were pre-primary. You had somebody bringing for a birthday party or a birthday celebration in school. Somebody bringing some, I don't remember the game, but I tweeted about it very angrily then. In Nintendo, each child in the class, and this happened in my son's class, each child in the class was given a Nintendo game by the parents. So it's a way of people have this way of eh, you, you know, there's this snobbery, and there's some people who are very good at just looking at you and knowing the value of what you are wearing. You understand?
Mm.
You may be wearing something that is very understated, and then somebody could walk up to you and say, "Wow, where did you get this?" I don't have that eye, for example. For me, clothes not clothes. But there are people who I have met some here who enter a thrift shop, as an example, and they are looking for very high-end clothing in a thrift shop. Why? Because of appearances. So human beings have this thing of doing that, and that's what has happened to the school system. So for context, the modern UK education system was the foundation was laid during Victorian times. So if you read all those Charles Dickens books, Oliver Twist, Great Expectations, you would see the start of the modern school system. And one of the things that was behind it was, aside from providing education, but to also foster a compliant workforce that was uniform. So, which is where the whole uniformity came. I mean, that is this way. So there was heavy emphasis on standardization and centralization. But what has happened over time is that, for example, private schools have emerged. You have in the secondary school system, you have it's a sort of three-tier system now. You have those expensive schools, the Eatons, the Winchesters. You have grammar schools, and then you have state schools. Maybe it's a four-tier system because there are some private schools that are not up to the level of Eton, Winchester. And so basically, it becomes, by the time children finish from secondary school, unless for those who are very, very bright and can make the jump into university, they're already set on a particular path. So you see, even the education system that was originally developed for some sort of uniformity has already been. I'm trying to avoid using the word corrupted, but I can't think of another word. It has been.
Corrupted,
No, I don't want to use corrupted.
influenced,
It's
tainted.
maybe tainted is better, but it's gotten to a point where it's actually the determining factor of your success and it's not, to be fair to the British, it's not just in the UK, but in many respects, the determining factor of your success is not necessarily your abilities, but the social circles that you move in. And in many respects, those social circles are determined by the school you attend. I mean, think Rishi Sunak. If Rishi Sunak's father had not been able to send him to Winchester, I would wager that he would never have been prime minister.
I mean, it's a postcode lottery, isn't it?
Yes,
So
it's
as people,
a part of it. It's not completely it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is, as people want to, of course, as parents, we want the best for our children.
Yeah, of
So you're
course.
thinking, right, where do it's quite interesting because I was having this conversation with a friend today, and it was about something else. But he mentioned there's a school very close to my house, and my kids are resuming, or my other kid is joining his brother there, in a few days. And he said, well, that school was the reason we bought a house here. And because he had said to himself, well, I want my kids to go to that school. So what I'm going to do is look for a house that's close to that place so that we can get there. And it's how the trajectory of one's life is set. And so if let's say again, for instance, you've just come like we have from Nigeria, and you've somehow managed to land in this part of town where you fall into that catchment area of the school, and you're able to send your kids there. The first thing that comes to your mind is, oh, good, it's a great school. They have a good review, good offset rating, and all that. And then suddenly it starts creeping up on you that, well, it's almost like
It has an effect on the pockets.
it
I
has
mean,
an effect. With great schools come great spending. To paraphrase Uncle Ben from Spider-Man. Uh,
I mean, I mean,
but
it's something that I will admit. When my wife made that decision that she wanted to carry her children away from Nigeria and all of that, one of the things that she was not researching which city is best to live in. She was
Mm.
researching where the best schools are. So, and it was around those places that she wanted us to find a house. So I think that's a very um
Is a valid
it's valid. It's very
yeah.
valid because yes, as parents, we want the absolute best we can get for our kids.
Mm.
So
Okay.
and there's no shame in that.
Oh, definitely. Tell you what, Cheta, why don't we go for a short break? I want to come back. We'll look at the government, what the government, or what series of governments have been doing to try and address this issue of high back to school costs.
Aside from writing about deprived white kids and papers.
Another episode for you to remind me which colors I fly.
Okay, let's go for the break.
Welcome back to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And I'm Cheta Wanze.
Right. So, Jetta, in the first half, we spoke about just how happy you were to fork out lots of money to give your darling kids the best start to a school year. Even if you had to be dragged by
Kicking and screaming.
kicking and screaming to the shops, and brother, believe me, I know how that feels. But let's talk a bit, if we can, about um just not the government's stance on high back to school cost, but also what we can expect, or what we should expect as a community. In 2020, YouGov carried out a poll that showed that 63% of British parents thought that schools should not be able to require parents to buy uniforms from a specific shop or supplier. Only 20% believed it was acceptable. I was
Since when did post start translating to government action?
No, but what one interesting thing I found, trying to piece together some info for this episode, is that some schools actually get revenue. So it's not just that we've sent to that supply because they have good quality, but they do get
Some
revenue from that.
kickbacks.
So, well,
Kickback. That's the kick. Let's see. Let's see. One of the things that I've always argued, and
Mm,
it's happened since the first time I lived in the UK, was the fact that a lot of the bad behavior that we have back home were
mm,
inherited from here.
mm,
And then basically what's just happened was that so they have some form of structure to quote and unquote take care of the excesses. We don't. So where you would see, for example, the prime minister here going about with a 3-car convoy, you will see the president of Nigeria going about with a 42-car convoy. You know, that kind of stuff. So our problem with a lot of these things is we just do it to excess. We lack restraints. It is a kickback that those schools get from those uniform manufacturers. End of story.
Ah.
Carry on.
Which makes it quite, because I've always wondered, why can't I just buy a badge and iron it on a shirt? But
Hi. Weibo. We can
no.
quickly get to we can go make we come get to Obioma make it come to am.
No, but when you think about
I
it,
actually had this argument with the wife, and I was like, they've given us the specifications. Let me find a tailor in Nigeria that will that will build this thing for. I
in
said,
fact, you know you know
I
you
was
know what
so shut down.
I think I suddenly have a business idea there. Huh. You know what? Let me drop a business plan. But you will see that these numbers show just
See,
the
this thing can
sentiments.
work. Oh, you are from Aba,
Mm.
I'm from Onitsha. Eh?
And we both know the road to China.
You know.
Oh my goodness, that's just bringing back the old stereotypes. But um, but when you look at the numbers, I mean, 63% of British parents think that these costs are excessive. So you would think that with that majority, or with that overwhelming support for a reduction in the excesses that these back to school costs are, that the government, successive governments anyway, would take this as a clear indication to do something, or to do something strongly. However, government after government have issued non-statutory guidance encouraging schools to keep costs down. And so it's amazing that with all this blowback, the best that governments have been able to do is to encourage. So from 2020 onwards, following a long campaign, we had what you call the Education Guidance About Cost of School Uniforms Act 2021. And but again, rather than make strong statements and requirements, the law requires schools to follow statutory guidance that included keeping costs down as a primary consideration, securing the best value for money from suppliers, allowing high street items, and avoiding single supplier contracts. It's not even a toothless bulldog. I mean, they've just removed. They might as well have removed the gums as well. It's just a dog with lips, nothing else.
I like that
So
expression.
yeah,
Um,
so what's the need of it? What's the use of it?
so I think I'm not sure if I would say it's a chicken and egg situation, but for me, it's a problem of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because some of these things are ways, and to be fair, there are some really dedicated head teachers that I have come across in this environment. Um, so some of these things are ways for the head teachers to get more funding back into their schools. Um, it's and I think that's very important, because one of the things that is problematic, and it's not just, to be fair, it's not just in the UK. It's a problem in, for example, the US. It's a problem in Canada. It's a huge problem in Nigeria. Is teacher pay.
Mm.
You want teachers to be well paid. We're no longer in the days where a teacher's reward was in heaven. So teachers need to be properly paid and need to feel um that I need to have a good environment to work in. So I think all of these things um uh it's sort of it's a soup, if I'm to put it like that. It's not very well prepared soup. And if if you're if I'm trying to avoid a particular language to describe children, especially knowing that my kids are among those, but it keeps popping into my head. So let me just go ahead and say it. If your work tools, which is the children, are not very presentable, it may have an effect on morale. So it's always nice. And one thing that I'm very sure of is if students are poorly turned out routinely, when Ofsted inspectors come, it will put them off. I don't know if you get what I mean.
Mm.
So it's a sort of um I'm trying to be very careful. I'm sure you see I'm struggling with language on this.
Just blink if you want me to draw you back from the edge of the precipice once more.
Can you see me? Um so that's it in a nutshell. It's important for kids to for kids to look good. I would admit that.
Mm.
Um so the
Yeah,
question.
but sorry, but doesn't that then even give credence to the fact that high costs of uniforms, if we're sticking to that, are a barrier to kids looking good? I mean, because think about it.
I
Yeah.
know the silence is the silence. Please tell our producer not to edit out the silence because I think it's what I'll call poignant silence.
Yeah.
Um, I think I don't think that that's high cost like barrier to kids looking good. There are maintenance. I think at the end of the day, I still think, and this is me having been fleeced of money for this just last week. Um, I think that it's exploitatively expensive. Um, but having said that, um, because okay, I'll give an example. Um, Last year, because in the UK generally clothes are expensive. So
Mm.
last year, I spent a long period in Nigeria for work. Got back and I had to apologize to the wife for abandoning her for such a while. So we went to Europe for a getaway, and
For your apology tour.
well, I missed a special event, so I was forced
Oh.
to apologize. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Okay.
So when we so one of the things that she noticed very quickly was that clothes were cheaper there
Mm.
of decent quality. So I think that a part of what you have to put in this situation, in this equation, is the fact that things tend to be more. The UK is quite an expensive place comparatively. The US even more so. So that has to factor into the whole equation, because when you compare, if you make comparisons, your average, if you convert everything to the dollar, the um the average spend for school uniforms in the UK would be about $410. In the US, it's 586, and in Canada, it's about 205. Which is comparable to the average spend in Europe. So the question has to be asked: why is the UK double that of Canada and Europe? And it's a significant question. So it brings us back to that thing. Cost of living in the UK is actually higher than it is in Europe.
Yeah, I get that, and that makes sense. However, if you look at, I think my biggest concern is that rather um than make real than pass or I guess by giving guidance, by asking schools to consider, the government really isn't doing anything. Especially if you look at uh, quality wise. Okay, so let's
Yeah,
forget the
because
Primax, for
so
instance.
because so, yeah, so
You can get
because
these
wait,
uniforms
wait,
or
wait,
lights
so,
from
sorry.
other stores.
I'm not going to say that the government's hands are tied. What I'm going to say is that a particularly American parasite has infected the UK very badly, and that's lobbying. So think about, for example, when the Starmer government came into office, there were things that they said they would do which they haven't gotten around to doing. And it's clear that there's quite a bit of lobbying going on. So
Oh,
that's
like what? I have
so
to push back there.
okay. So for example, the first example that's popping into my head now has to do with geopolitics. So you have this on this whole Israel Palestine thing. Some of the things that Stama has promised. Um, and I'm not going to talk about recognizing Palestinian states, but promising to at least reduce UK expenditure, UK sending weapons to the Israelis. They haven't done that. If we go back to the um, uh, non-dump tax, is that what it's called? And sorry, I have so many things that are swelling in my head, but there's a certain taxation for the high-end guys.
Yeah, but because I know that
That's the
non-dom tax has
promised.
been implemented anyway.
Yeah. So it's not non-dump. There's a certain I don't know why I'm suddenly so unsharp about this. And this is wrong. This is not. You are getting away with murder here on the quay, and you're enjoying this. So this is wrong. There's a certain tax. It's a wealth
uh,
tax. It's a wealth tax, but there's a certain language. But for the record, the wealth tax is something that should be implemented, and it's something that has always been a Labour thing. We of course we removed Tony Blair from the picture because Tony Blair was not what was nominally to the left. He really was slightly to the right. But Starmer, who came up as a leftist or as someone on the left, should have done all of this, but he has not. It
yeah,
just tells you everything.
no, but remember with schools, for instance, the 20% VAT on private schools has been implemented.
Yes, I would grant that
especially,
much.
yeah,
I'll
and
grant
especially
that
as
much.
we're talking about
And see
schools.
and given the backlash that they faced, I see why they're stepping gingerly on so many other things. That would mean the wealthiest in the country paying their fair share, or to use that expression, carrying more on the broader shoulders, carrying more of the weight.
So it's so while yes, overall you can say, but when it comes to specific things like or specific campaign promises like 20% VAT on private schools that has been sorted, it would seem that on the issue that would hit every single person whose kids are going to school, there needs to be more bite rather than just recommendations to schools to please be nice about how you charge parents and please be nice about how many of these items you ask parents to bring. Because that doesn't help. And what that also does is that it leaves charities and community organizations to pick up, especially when it comes to supporting parents and students with uniforms. So, I mean, to give you an example, if you look at the Derby Food for Thought, for instance, in their in their 2025 Uniform Hub report roundup, they've said they've helped 162 households, or they supported 162 households with uniforms, and that's about 280 children, 2 pairs of shoes, 1,017 uniform items. Whilst these may seem small, think
I
about
just
it, this is just
remembered
Derby.
Ndukwe. I just remembered. They were supposed to increase income tax for the top 5% of earners.
Okay,
Nane-
well, but
no,
as I
no. Now that I remembered, you want to brush it off.
no, I'm not
Okay.
brushing it
No,
off.
no, no, no,
I'm
no.
not
Go
brushing
on,
it
no,
off.
go on. I'll forgive you this time around because I was uncharacteristically unsharp. I
Yeah,
just forgot.
but as I pointed out, and this is one thing that a few people just keep complaining to me about, the 20% VAT on private schools, I think was a good one, because my
But
argument
it was a drop in the ocean. We
Mm.
can talk about that since we're talking about schools. I just wanted to point out that I just remembered that promise to increase income tax for the top 5% of earners, which has been
so
quietly shelved.
So would you then, without saying so, Cheta, are you sort of like comparing the school lobby to, say, I don't know, maybe the sugar lobby or the whatever powerful lobby is there, to say
Now
that,
the same WhatsApp group.
yeah. So in your mind, the school lobby, especially when it comes to uniform,
It's see
is just as tough.
lobbying generally. It's so lobbying in itself is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's lobbying is necessary to get. There are so many good initiatives that you need to lobby to get over the line. What has happened over time in most Western democracies is that the moneyed class have cornered all the lobbying opportunities. So basically, it's the lobbying tends to push the interests of the moneyed class rather than push the general interests of the society.
Well, that is quite the take. And I'm
You
just
don't
wondering,
agree with
Cheta.
it?
No. Of course, I don't not agree with it.
Okay,
This society is in a constant flux between, as we've always said, on this podcast anyway. It is a class thing. A
it's a
lot of what
class
we're
thing.
seeing today is a class thing. It's just that the narratives are different, and when people fall for the hype, fall for the narratives, it pays those people who would want us to forget that at the end of the day, what we're fighting is class warfare. But yeah, and it seems a fitting way to sort of like draw the curtains, schooling people as we talk about back to school. But Chesa, what are your last thoughts as people get ready to go back to school? How can people better support themselves, or, how can people make sure that they are spending more of their money on things that maybe better nutrition or whatever, rather than just on uniforms?
So two things. I think first things first, you look at it from the point of view of an African expat, who isn't entitled to public funds. You have It's a tough financial landscape to navigate, and it requires a lot of strategic action. Um, you can't rely on council grants. You have to pay for school meals. Um, I think that a way of saving money will be to make meals for your kids. That takes time, though. I must admit. Um, in my case, the wife spends a lot of her Saturday making meals ahead of time. However, some places give free school meals, which you are entitled to. If so, you can make inquiries to find out if your kids are eligible for free school meals. If they are, please take it. It saves you time. It saves you money. So
Sorry, just to on that, because my kids were in primary school, they were entitled to that. But my kids being, or at least the younger one being the Nigerian that he is, he came back and just said, "Look, I
yeah,
don't
so
understand the taste."
that's so it's actually especially given that the current political climate is a climate that claims that people who immigrate to the UK do not want to blend in. That's actually a way to blend them in from early, because we would always cook our eba. We'll always make our eba. So why can't you let them get used to fish and chips in school?
He came back and said, "Look, I don't understand the taste," and so it was
You
a thing
should.
of,
He was still
but
he was
no, but
still at
you
the
can't
age
force
where
him
he
not.
could be molded.
Yeah, hey, look, have you met my son?
Yes, I have. Anyway,
We had to then just start packing food, because at some point you're like, look, but no, but if his brother, on the other hand, has just gone full. I mean, these days a little bit of pepper, like, oh my god, there's too much pepper. So they're polar opposites when it comes to their culinary taste.
oh well. Anyway, so one thing that I know is that schools have a lot of schools have something called pupil premium, that they can use to help students who are in financial need. Now, this is away from things like uniforms. These are the costs or things that can help during school. It's also important for as many of us as possible to get involved in school governance and all of that. It's a way of getting involved in the community and assimilating. Um, there are some charities I've heard of, Bottle UK, that offers grants to parents who are struggling. The Salvation Army is also another good place. We one thing that I found, that is common to a lot of our people in this part of the world is we bring the mentality when you are telling people go to a thrift shop, they have that mentality of that it's like bend down boutique, and because of that they don't want to go. No, it's not like bend down boutique. So any opportunity that you have, especially when you're at that point where the kids are growing very fast, any opportunity that you can use to minimize costs, please take it. There's no shame in it.
Yeah. And that's true. I think you've touched on something there where people from our communities are always looking over their shoulders and thinking, what would people say or what would people think? And but you will find that it's a different culture here. People realize, people know that for scarcity sometimes can be a fact of life, and people also realize that they do not always have the available resources that they would want to have. Therefore, the thrift shops or charity shops are not a way of people pointing down their nose or looking down their noses at others. Rather, it's a way of people saying, look, we have this excess that we do not need. I don't think someone else might have use of it. And if that's you, look, there's no shame in saying I can get this bag in here and then use it. Because at the end of the day, you don't do yourself any good if you put yourself under pressure that you can avoid. So as we
Precisely.
go back, as we go back, as our children go back to school, as we get ready to send our children back to school, look for those uniform banks, because there will definitely be some in your area. If you're in Derby, as I've mentioned, there's a Derby Food for Thought Alliance which runs a uniform bank, and you can get in touch with them. There are some churches, or some religious organizations or other charities will also have some provisions, hopefully, for to help you get back to school.
And please,
Look,
for those of you who, you should also help, contribute. So, for example,
definitely,
unused books that your kids may have used, or did not use, give them to charity. So it's not just about taking to
it's
help
about giving.
you also give as well.
Yeah, and on that note, that I think it will also be good to note that, look, if your children, as Tita has said, every 2 or 3 months they're growing out of things, one way to ensure that you help others is to, as much as it's humanly possible, have the children take care or use their uniforms responsibly, so that others who may not be able to buy them brand new off the shelves can still use this because they've been well looked after, and someone else can have the joys of learning in presentable clothes.
Very good.
On that note, Cheta, shall we say class dismissed?
Class dismissed.
See you at the next one.
See you.